Hello and welcome to the Marketing Mix. These come around so quickly, even though they're every 2 weeks. But I'm really excited about this one today because I'm not very good with change. I don't cope with it very well, and that's what we're going to talk about. Our brains and bodies cope in different ways with changes, and it's been hard for the last few years. We've had lots of big changes to deal with. And when it comes to running your own business, when you're a micro business owner, so that's either just you on your own or you've got a team of up to about 9 people, those changes can really impact how your business copes and how you and your team work together. So I'm really excited to have my friend with me today. Her name's Helen, and she's an expert in coping with changes. So Helen, tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Lovely to see you, Manal, and lovely to see everybody as well. So I'm delighted to be here. So I'm Helen Wright, and I run a company called The Right Coach, which was very handy since that's the name I was born with. and I actually help business leaders and entrepreneurs over the age of 40 who are feeling really overwhelmed. They're successful, but they're overwhelmed and they're struggling with their resilience and well-being. So I sort of help them, whether it's anything through coming back from ill health, whether it's anything around radical change, maybe a midlife crisis, what I like to call it sort of a midlife crossroads. And also there is quite a lot of prevalence around adult ADHD, which is showing up especially within the entrepreneurial market as well. So it is something that I am, in terms of change, I've worked in it for a very long time. I used to work for organisations for the likes of Visa, Marks and Spencer's, Macmillan Cancer Support. And I saw the way in which change affects people and how they respond. And I've had to go through quite a lot myself. So I'm delighted to sort of see how this all manifests.
And so you just alluded to personal change. And I know just for everyone watching, Helen is actually a friend. She's a friend of, originally a friend of my husband, now a friend of mine. And I know that there have been some big changes in your life that I feel like have led you to where you are now. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, thank you. And yes, Ian, your husband is my old university housemate. So yeah, we're great friends. Yes, well, I was sort of always somebody that embraced life very much so. And I kind of got to quite senior positions within business, firstly within marketing and then within the people transformation space. And I'd never really had a chance to reflect on things, but I had a serious injury. I had a brain injury about 15 years ago out of the blue. And it kind of shook me to the core and really kind of pulled the rug from underneath me. And I think when we take things for granted, when we take really simple things like picking up a coffee cup and drinking it, where your brain is sending messages all the time, when that's taken away and you are used to being somebody that is a real kind of get on with things, it's very difficult to navigate what that looks like. So I had to relearn everything more or less. And I'd always been a very independent person. Had never asked anybody for help before in the past, but I was forced to. And I was forced to do it because my body and my brain were telling me to slow down. And so I learnt, firstly by, I would say a little bit by force, to start looking after my well-being. And bit by bit, I had to relearn how to do things. So I had to do things around not just about physically moving and speaking, but around how to reframe really difficult, challenging things that can happen to you, how to reframe them in your brain. And I learnt how to bounce back. And I also learned very much about the brain is the most incredible organ, the essence of neuroplasticity, and we can all bounce back from whatever challenge life throws at us, whether we choose it or not. It's just about there are little tweaks that one can make around how you sort of think about things and also how you get guided along the way and asking for help.
It's funny you should say that because one of my really old friends I used to house share with her had, I don't know what the extent of your brain injury was, but she had a tumour just on the base of her skull, just on her spine, which was late 90s, and she had to relearn everything. She had to learn how to walk, how to talk, how to write again. So
Mm.
it's amazing. I mean, she's fine now. She's thriving, but it's incredible how much the brain, like the rest of you, really relies on your brain. So all of that you just told us, how did it influence your working life and that work-life balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what it did to start with, well, firstly, it made me pause what I was doing. I was always racing around trying to kind of get, a better job, or try to get things that I thought were seen as, a sort of status to a certain degree. And it made me take stock, and it made me realize that things that I was grateful for, so things like compassion, helping others, kindness, it's stuff that I really enjoyed doing within a working environment. And I realized that life is short and we've got one life. And actually, if there's something that you really love doing and you enjoy helping people as well, then I just thought, well, actually, what I would like to do was to retrain. So I retrained as a coach about 15 years ago. I'd been coached myself. I then worked within organizations, sort of doing business transformation programs. And what it enabled me to do was really use my experiences, both personally and professionally, to help say, well, you know what, change will come in. And that's the only constant that we have in life. We know that things are going to change. But it's how we weather those storms. And it's whether we decide as business owners, I decided I wanted to do my own business. But sometimes as business owners, we're the CEO or the captain of our own ship. So we try and push through absolutely everything. And the impact that that can have on both ourselves, on our loved ones, on the business itself can be huge. But when you're in the eye of the storm, it's very, very difficult to just be able to take a breath and to sit back and go, right, okay, I probably need to prioritize my well-being. And I know that if I do this, it will enhance my business. But how do I start? Because you're on that sort of the go train all the time.
So let's, I don't want to do this, but let's rewind to 2020, the year that we didn't think that the world would stop, but it pretty much did. And COVID is still around, but obviously we're not going through all the things we went through in 2020. So tell us a little bit about how COVID has really affected work and like employment and, and how it's impacted micro businesses.
Well, the word is hugely, because we all had to transform radically. I mean, it's the biggest change in 70 years in terms of ways of working. They reckon that really in terms of industrialization, in the last 3 years, we've in fact had to radically flip our working practices. So everything from where you would go to an office, you'd be having human connection, you would be having face-to-face interactions, which are 3D, and that in essence can also help your well-being. It was flipped on its head, and people were having to work remotely. You were having to change your business offerings potentially in order to fit the market, and people stopped spending money. And that, to a certain degree, they started spending money on some things and not spending on others. And I think as a business owner, it brought a variety of things. It brought opportunities in that the majority of the world went online, and you've got this sort of being able to do digital business. You're able to conduct meetings, etc., transactional. But at the same time, it also had a huge impact on people's well-being, because to begin with, we were only allowed an hour out each day. And when you're used to, if you're leading your own team,
easy to think that, right?
Yes, isn't it crazy? It's just a bizarre feeling. But what that did is, and then they say that the sense of well-being and actually comes from a mixture of a variety of things. There's something called resilience muscles that you can hone. And if these 7 aren't really kind of brought to fruition, then it can have a big thing. So actually in 2020, the things we probably weren't really working on was, number 1, positivity. That was quite challenging. Number 2, our confidence as business leaders, because we couldn't test ideas. We didn't have that kind of coffee break or that water cooler moment. Priorities. A lot of us were firefighting because we were scared. Fear can shut the brain down. It can also shut everything around how we process stuff and how we push our businesses forward. Creativity is another muscle. And when you are firefighting, creativity is a luxury to a certain degree, and your brain has to unlock areas in the brain to actually provide space to be creative. So that wasn't there. Connection, obviously, you know, you kind of got used to. I know you didn't have Bailey the dog by then, Manal, but who is gorgeous, by the way. But connection, that's a huge thing, because you have a kinship. There's the peer-to-peer delivery. You don't have any of that. The structure changed massively, and structure is huge. And then things around experimentation. If you are a solopreneur, you kind of are left to your own devices, and you're having to make things up as you go along. So all these things that build the resilient set of muscles were sort of thrown out the window. So you had to go online, you had to build online communities. And for example, you know, Manal, you've set up a fabulous community. And I guess from your perspective as well, building in that connectivity has helped build the business. And we can see that people probably on this call as well, all your business leaders and entrepreneurs and people who might well have been struggling, have had to reinvent themselves to a certain degree.
It's true. It is so true. And I know in that first lockdown, I went flat out, because I just was like, for me, it was, I felt like I was in quite a, I wouldn't say luxurious, but quite a stable position, in that, you know, I have a husband, I had a level of security, and not everything hinged on me making money in my business. And so my mind just went to, right, how can I help other small businesses, the ones that have had to completely shut down? So that's where I went. And that's, I think that really kept my brain active, and kept me from sort of almost panicking about the situation. So that's how I sort of dealt with it. But like, what have you seen in terms of impact on small businesses? Because that, we've had that, and then we've gone into the whole fuel crisis, and now we're in the cost of living, and like, it's kind of been one thing after another. So what kind of impact have you seen on people?
I think there's been a mix, and it's actually been changing quite radically, like every 3 months. It's all of a sudden we've developed this propensity to change. So we're getting used to it, but actually what we call the reptilian part of the brain, the old part, still goes into fight, flight, freeze or fawn mode. So what I have been seeing is that some business leaders who, for them, change, especially within an entrepreneurial setting as well, you know, you tend to be an adaptable person, a flexible person. So people would make changes, clients might make changes, but then what would happen is, if they didn't necessarily work, or it was a little tweak, then what I was finding is that some people were starting to panic, and then they were trying to maybe throw the baby out with the bathwater. Whereas what I was doing was kind of coaching to say, well, actually, you've got a really solid business idea here, or you have a really solid business, but let's look at the way that you can be a bit more agile about that. So you're still working within your comfort zone. You might be looking at developing a slightly different proposition if this proposition isn't selling. But what might that look like to you? And how can it be a good fit for your business, as opposed to changing everything and starting from scratch again? So there were a few that went, oh, hang on, the proverbial has hit the fan. I've got to start again. And there were other people who flew with it. And I think what happened is, if you can start to build case by case study examples, you've got some evidence where I can then share with business leaders and say, look, anecdotally, this is a business that was going through a really similar challenge, and we were kind of all in it together, really. But these are the kind of things that they did. It was about taking your own temperature check as well, and seeing how, when you show up in the morning, how are you actually, not just what are you thinking, but what's your body telling you? And you can kind of like go, well, this is overwhelm. All right, I can understand that this is overwhelm. Where is that coming from? And then you start to observe the overwhelm, as opposed to actually being in it itself. So there's lots of things. But I think business leaders it's getting there. There's more understanding now that people have taken things online. There's a lot more businesses that have decided, you know, I've got a better life after COVID. They left where they were living, they bought in the country, and they set up their own businesses. So it's brought opportunities as well. It really has.
So in terms of you know, if you're a business owner, let's say you've got a small team. I think one of the businesses I mentored recently, she has a shop, and she also has her own massage therapy business. But the shop, she has a couple of people working there for her. So you talk about taking your temperature and sort of understanding how you show up for work. But as the owner of that business, if you have a team, what should you be doing to understand how your team's feeling and how they're coping?
Yeah, the first thing is asking questions. But the first thing that you can do is look, and if you know your team, if you've got a small team, firstly, you'll have employed them in the first place. So you will have an idea as to potentially what their communication preference is. So depending on whether you're sort of introverted, what I like to call reflective, or extroverted, that could manifest in different ways. But by asking, by saying even just sort of basic things like, how are you doing? Checking in with people. If you can do it face to face, fantastic. If you can't, then just taking time as a leader to, whether it's in a morning, but just taking the time to ask them how they're doing. And they might prefer it on the phone, they might prefer it on a video call, or they might prefer it just by an email, or if you have like a Slack channel or something like that. So just tiny little things that firstly, how are you doing? And then starting to build in what we call kind of, it's not comfort breaks, but it's self-care breaks, but for the whole team. And to understand that it's not natural for a human being to be in front of a screen now for 8 hours every single workday, and the impact that has. So encouraging your team from the input that you've had by asking them, to say, what kind of thing, can you suggest ideas that we could speak to the team together? Anything we could do for fun? How are the projects going? And just by taking a vested interest in your employees, you get to understand more about them. They get to understand more about you, and you start to build that connection. So it's just being open and even saying, look, admitting as a leader, it's hard for us all. And saying it's hard for me, and I might have to deliver some difficult messages, but this is coming from a place of change. It's not coming from a place of, not coming from a place of being didactic, and that we've all struggled. And I think that sense sometimes of kinship can really help. It all depends on the industry you're in. If you're in, for example, quite an IT-based one where it is very much around inputting on a keyboard, you can just flick people an email, or you can do it on a text. And some people won't want to respond, and that's absolutely fine. But it's just having those channels open that you're able to do that.
I think, like for me, most of the time I work on my own, but it's quite telling, especially in 2020, that I've got sort of quite a close circle of what I would call business buddies. And it was quite telling in that year how many of us sort of checked in on each other to make sure that everyone was okay, and that felt like, you talking about kinship. You've got your whole sort of life outside of work, and quite a lot of the times, Ian, my husband, he doesn't get what it's like running a business. He doesn't get. So he's great for my kind of talking to him about stuff outside of the business, but it's really, really, really useful having people who are in the same boat as me. So if you don't have a community, like it doesn't even have to be a community, a couple of people that you really trust, that you would talk to if something's not quite right, you can pick up the phone to them, which I've done many times, and go, this isn't working, what shall I do? So that for me is really important. But I think what you were saying about making time to have fun, I think that is crucial. Whether you're working on your own, or particularly if you've got a small team, I feel that is really important in helping people bond as a team.
Yeah, and it is difficult. I mean, it is difficult because how do you bond with somebody over a screen sometimes? But there are ways of doing it. But there's also ways where you can just say to your team, you know what, I don't want you at your desk at the moment. I want you to go outside and just go and get a bit of fresh air for a short while. And just a 10-minute break can make a massive difference to both people's mental health and physical health. And that's where the check-ins come in. You know, it's sometimes the people that you don't hear from that are the people that really, that's the people that you need to sort of reach out to and just check that they're okay.
Not worry about the quiet ones. So how do you kind of, you know, there's so many conflicting priorities. You've got, especially if it's just you in your business, you are your everything. So what should we be doing to prioritize our well-being? Are there any techniques, tips that you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, the thing I would recommend over everything to start with is about, especially when you're working from home, is about creating structure and a routine. And I'm not somebody that is a routine person, but I've had to kind of enforce it on myself because what that then does is it can separate. When we're working from home, you can start to separate the work. Even you might be in a different room, but you're separating the work from the kitchen. And the things that you can do, I mean, for example, one of the things I do that I'm not expecting everybody else to do is I do a cold plunge dip every morning. I've got this, I know I'm crazy, but it's, I bought this little pool, tiny little pool that you pop yourself in, but you can do things that just starts the day off when you might wake up in the morning and your brain might be absolutely full of everything because you are spinning so many plates as an entrepreneur. And just things like doing things like what I call 4-7 breathing. So just some simple breathing that take 2-3 minutes. That's all it takes in the start of the day. And that's proven to regulate, excuse me, I've got my 2 cats fighting now right by me. You don't have to pick a time. And 4-7 breathing. So what you do for 2 minutes, so you breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause for 2, 1, 2, and then out for 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what they do is the double the speed of the breath out means that you're eliminating a lot of carbon dioxide, bringing in, and it automatically within 2-3 minutes you can change a racing brain, and this is proven scientifically evidence, a racing brain into one that just feels clearer, has more clarity. So that's one of the things you can do. You can also do some things, and again, it depends on, you can do what I would call the moody dance, which was, and I used to do it when I was little, but you just put on a tune in the kitchen, and you can put a tune on in the kitchen and pretend that nobody's watching, or send your partner out and just do it like full on stamping just for 1-2-3 minutes, and stand there and notice the difference in your brain and your body. There's so many different techniques, and it depends on the person, it depends on their approach. But what I do is I talk to the individual, I ascertain what might work for them. And then there is a different approach, which might involve tapping, it might involve just talking, it might involve doing absolutely nothing, but it's setting up those bite-sized chunks. So in the morning, make sure you do it. At lunchtime, make sure you do it. When you're finishing, make sure you do it, and have a 10-minute break if you can every single hour. That's what I would start with.
I mean, the 10 minutes, especially if you're working on a screen, that you should be doing anyway. I've just taken on a client who's an osteopath, and he's recently written a blog post about how sitting at your desk all day is just not doing your body any favors. And as I'm sat there reading it, I'm going, he's talking to you. So it's absolutely, you should get up and have a break. And I think for me, before we got Bailey, I didn't realise actually how beneficial this would be. But I love taking him on his first walk of the morning, because it just gives me that time between waking up and having breakfast and then sitting down at my desk. I just get this time just to be with him. We go to the park. I try desperately to stop him from eating everything that he sees on the floor. We have a bit of a Barney, and then we make up, and then we come home, and it's a little bit like a commute that I used to have back in the day, but it doesn't involve the train and lots of sweaty, horrible people. So,
sounds like a win-win.
It's finding your thing, really, isn't it?
It is. It's finding your thing, and it's actually going, right, what is it that I can do to just how you be kind to your friend. So if your friend, think about the dialogue or the first thing that you might say to your friend or your daughter or your son or your husband. We never say it to ourselves, do we? We're the first ones to go like that and to expect ourselves to be the most productive. And yet when the tables are turned, we would never say that to somebody else. So we need to just practice a bit of self-compassion and regular breaks. Definitely about sitting, standing. If you've got, like, I've got a sit stand desk converter, but it's just finding out what works for you. And there are lots of tools and lots of techniques. And I've learned good ones along the way. I've learned rubbish ones along the way, but you just kind of know what works and what doesn't. And then it's a case of start small. And when you start small, bit by bit by bit by bit, they always say it's about between 5 to 21 days that it takes to build a habit. And then all of a sudden it becomes automatic. So,
well, on that note, if you want to start building some positive habits, Helen has kindly offered everyone who's watching a free 30-minute one-to-one session with her. And I'm just going to pop the link into the chat. So if you go to that link, there is a calendar and you can find some time that works for you. I definitely would recommend doing that, because I think even if it's, even if you decide that 30 minutes is enough, sometimes talking to somebody that doesn't know you is actually really beneficial. And she's lovely. I know, because she's my friend.
And you've had to say that because I paid you a £5. Very cheap.
So no, do book that session. It'd be worth it. And I would say, doing something for yourself and managing your well-being is really important when your business relies on you to exist. So if you work on your own in your business, that's you. Your business relies on you to exist. If you're ill or something happens, your business stops. So it's really important that you keep yourself well up here and in your body.
Absolutely.
For anyone who's watching who doesn't get the marketing morsel, which is my weekly newsletter, I'm popping that link into the chat. It's I send it every week on a Tuesday. Marketing tips in particular, but when you join, you get other things as well. There's a private Facebook group that you can join where there is stuff that I haven't shared anywhere else, and it's free. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm hosting a webinar just for the list, all about how I have grown my email list. So I'm going to share my secrets, and so there's lots more other stuff as well. So do join that. I will just say that in 2 weeks' time, I'm flying solo on the marketing mix. So you just get me. I say just me. I've got a lot to talk about. If you give me half an hour, I'll fill it. Right.
I'm not saying a word.
I'm going to be talking about why solo business owners in particular need to be using email marketing. Else, you might want to watch that. I don't know.
I will do. Well, Manel is fab, and I'm learning a lot about how to do email marketing as well. I really am.
So that's in 2 weeks' time, and there's a link there for you to add it to your calendar. And that just leaves me to say thank you so much, Helen. There's a lot in there that I found useful myself, and there's a lot we didn't have time for, so maybe we might have a follow-up session at some point as well, just to dig into other little bits and pieces a bit more. But thank you so much for today. Everyone, I will see you in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be talking about why solo business owners really need to be using email marketing. I will see you then. Bye.
Thanks, Manel. Bye.